They lied for 19 years. Last night, I opened a sealed envelope that had my name on it, hidden behind a drawer in my parents' filing cabinet. Inside were adoption papers, with a woman's name I've never heard in my life. And when I showed them to my parents, the way they reacted, I knew my entire life wasn't what I thought it was. I used to believe that the story of my life was simple. Not perfect, but predictable. A quiet suburban house, a mother who hummed in the kitchen while cooking breakfast, a father who worked long hours but still found time to help me with homework, birthdays with homemade cakes, trips to the lake in summer, family photos lined across the hallway. Nothing extraordinary, nothing suspicious, just normal. But the night I found the documents they never wanted me to see, that normality collapsed like a house built on sand. It happened by accident, which I still think is the part that hurts the most. If my father hadn't asked me to look for an insurance form, if the cabinet drawer hadn't jammed, if I hadn't pulled it too hard, maybe I never would have known. Maybe I would still be living inside the illusion they'd constructed for 19 years. The filing cabinet always felt like one of those boring constants in the house, filled with tax papers, bank statements, medical forms, things adults worried about. I knelt on the carpet, pulling folders out one by one. My dad's voice floated down the hall, telling me the form should be under the tab marked home insurance. But the folder wasn't there. When I reached deeper, my hand brushed something thin wedged behind the drawer's metal rail, a corner of a sealed envelope. It had my name on it, Noah, written in my mother's handwriting. A strange chill worked down my back. I pulled the envelope free, brushing the dust off it. The weight of it felt wrong in my hands, too light, too secret, like something that wasn't meant to be touched. Inside were documents. At first I thought it was some boring medical record or something, but then the headline at the top hit me like a punch to the chest. Adoption Placement Agreement. My throat tightened instantly. I blinked hard, trying to make the words change, trying to force them into something that made sense. But the more I read, the more the room tilted around me. Birth mother, Isabel Reyes. Birth father, child, male, newborn. Placement date, 2 weeks earlier than the birth date I grew up celebrating. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my life. I read the lines again, slower this time, my pulse hammering in my ears. My mother's handwriting on the envelope now felt like a betrayal. How long had she kept this hidden? Why had she kept it hidden? Why did they never tell me? Suddenly the house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath alongside me. I stood, the papers trembling in my hands, and walked toward the living room where my parents were sitting. My mother was folding laundry on the couch. My father was scrolling through emails on his tablet. Everything was painfully normal. The lie in my hands felt radioactive. Mom? Dad? My voice cracked. Both of them turned toward me. My mother smiled at first until she saw the papers. Her face drained of color instantly. The dish towel slipped from her hands. My father straightened slowly, his jaw tightening. Where did you get that? He asked, voice low, almost a growl. It was in the cabinet, I said. Behind the drawer. I was just looking for the insurance forms. My mother whispered, "Oh God." Barely audible. I held the papers out. Is this real? My father stood. Noah, let's sit down. No, my voice came out sharper than I intended. Just tell me, why do these papers say I'm adopted? Who is Isabel Reyes? Why didn't you ever tell me? My mother burst into tears instantly, covering her face with shaking hands. My father reached to comfort her, then hesitated. His eyes flicking back to me, full of something I couldn't yet name. Guilt? Fear? Shame? It's not what you think, he said. It is complicated. Stop saying that, I snapped. I don't want complicated. I want the truth. My father exhaled heavily, running a hand across his face. Noah, we were going to tell you. One day, when it was the right time. When I was 30? 40? My voice rose. 19 years. And you never thought maybe now was a good time? My mother sobbed harder. My father shot me a warning look, but I didn't care. The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. He opened his mouth again, but all that came out was, "We did what we thought we had to do." For who? I demanded. For me? Or for you? They looked at each other, and in that moment I realized they didn't even agree on the answer. My mother finally found her voice through her tears. "We were afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of losing you." Her words should have softened me, but they only tightened the burning knot in my chest. Lose me from what? To who? Why would they have to fear losing me unless there was a version of the story where I wasn't theirs to begin with? I couldn't listen anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in, dragging me into a life I suddenly couldn't recognize. I walked past them and up the stairs. My mother called my name, her voice cracking. I didn't stop. In my room, I spread the documents on my desk, reading every line with shaking hands. The signatures, the dates, the blank name field where my biological father should have been, the address listed for my birth mother. Questions swarmed me, stinging like wasps. Why had they lied? What were they protecting me from? Was I taken from this woman? Did she want me? Was I stolen? Saved? Something in between? When I tried to sleep, my mind refused to quiet. I stared at the ceiling until dawn's gray light crept across my walls. No matter how many times I replayed the moment I confronted them, nothing made sense. There was only one way forward. I needed answers. Real ones. Not excuses. Not apologies. Not a carefully packaged version of the truth. The address on the adoption papers burned in my mind. A place 3 hours away. A place I had never been. A place that held the first real clue to the question that had suddenly become the center of my entire identity. Who was I before I became their son? By the time the sun rose fully, my decision was made. I grabbed my keys, the documents, and a jacket, and I left before my parents woke up. Maybe they would panic. Maybe they would call. But I couldn't stay in that house another minute while the truth sat buried in dusty drawers. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my home in the rearview mirror. The windows still dark, still peaceful. It didn't feel like home anymore, not until I knew what they had taken from me. And so, I drove toward the past they'd hidden for 19 years. The drive to the address on the adoption papers felt longer than it should have. 3 hours passed in silence, the road stretching endlessly in front of me while my mind replayed every moment of the previous night. My mother's tears, my father's stiff posture, their refusal to give me anything more than vague excuses. Every mile pulled me farther away from the life I knew and closer to a truth I wasn't sure I was ready for, but couldn't walk away from. By the time I reached the neighborhood, the sun had climbed high into a washed-out sky. The houses looked tired, worn by time and neglect. Fences sagged under their own weight. Yards grew wild with weeds. It felt like stepping into a forgotten story, one that had been abandoned long before I ever appeared in it. The house listed on the papers stood at the end of a cracked walkway. Its paint had peeled to reveal older layers, patches of blue beneath faded white, like memories overwritten again and again. The windows were clouded, coated in dust, as if trying to hide whatever was inside. I hesitated before knocking. What if someone answered? What if no one did? What if everything I believed about myself changed in the next 5 minutes? Before I could gather the courage, a voice interrupted my thoughts. You looking for someone? I turned to see an elderly woman standing on the porch of the house next door. Short, gray hair pulled into a bun, hands lightly gripping the railing. Her eyes were cautious but curious. Yeah, I said, stepping closer. I'm looking for someone who used to live here. Isabel Reyes. Her expression shifted instantly, recognition, followed by something heavier. Isabel? She repeated softly, almost to herself. Then she motioned to her porch. Come sit. I think you should hear what I know. I followed her, heart hammering. She introduced herself as Mrs. Callahan. Up close, I could see her hands trembling ever so slightly. She lowered herself onto a worn wooden bench and gestured for me to sit beside her. Isabel was a good girl, she began. Quiet, kept to herself. But she had a hard life. Too hard for someone her age. I swallowed. Did you know her well? Not well enough to help her the way she needed, but enough to see she was drowning. Her gaze drifted toward the old house. She got pregnant young. And once the baby came, things got worse. My chest tightened. Worse how? Mrs. Callahan sighed. There were men. One in particular. Dangerous. Controlling. The kind of man who liked having power over people who had none. My stomach twisted. She'd show up with bruises sometimes, the woman continued. Said she fell. Said she bumped into things. Everyone knew she was lying, but no one knew how to help her without making things worse. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Was this the environment I was born into? Was this the world I had come from? What happened to her? I asked. Mrs. Callahan's lips pressed into a thin line. One night there was a lot of noise. Yelling, crashing. Someone screamed. Then, silence. I leaned forward. Did anyone call the police? Yes, but by the time they arrived, the house was empty. Isabel was gone. And the baby? She looked at me then, really looked. They said someone had taken him. No one knew who. Just that he wasn't there anymore. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like the ground beneath the bench had disappeared. There were rumors, she added quietly, about a couple seen leaving with a baby wrapped in a blanket. But it was late, dark. No one could say who they were. My hands shook. A couple. A baby. Taken in the night. Did she ever come back? I asked, though I already sensed the answer. No, Mrs. Callahan whispered. She disappeared from this place like a ghost. No forwarding address. No phone number. Nothing. Some folks think she ran to save herself. Others think she didn't make it out alive. The words pierced deeper than I expected. I thanked her, though the words felt hollow leaving my mouth, and returned to my car. Inside, the silence roared. Bits of information began forming into a picture I didn't yet understand. Isabel had not abandoned me. Something or someone had torn us apart. But I needed more than rumors. I needed something concrete, which brought me to my next stop, the adoption agency. The building looked like time had forgotten it. Flickering fluorescent lights, stained carpet, faded posters peeling from the walls. A woman at the front desk greeted me with the kind of polite disinterest you develop after decades in a job nobody appreciates. Her name tag read Ms. Harper. I'm trying to get information about an adoption, I explained. My adoption. She raised an eyebrow. Year. 19 years ago. She gave me a long look, curious, cautious, then stood with a soft sigh and disappeared into the back. When she returned, she held a thin folder. My name was written on the tab. You sure you're ready to see what's in here? She asked. Yes. She handed it to me, but her face told me she wasn't comfortable. Inside were documents, some matching what I found at home, but others I'd never seen before. Additional notes, signatures, annotations in the margins, and something else. A torn letter clipped to the back. That letter? I said slowly. It wasn't in the envelope at home. Ms. Harper hesitated. It probably wasn't supposed to be. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was rushed, jagged, ink smudged in places. It wasn't signed, but it mentioned me by name, and it begged anyone, to keep me safe. My heart felt too big for my chest. My eyes burned. Who wrote this? I asked. We don't know, Ms. Harper said quietly. But the signatures on your release forms? She leaned in. They never looked right to me. Too shaky, too inconsistent. As if someone signed on behalf of your mother, without permission. The world tilted again. Is that legal? She gave a humorless laugh. Back then, things slipped through the cracks. Especially when a child was at risk. Risk. That word rang in my ears. I left the agency feeling heavier than when I arrived. Every answer spawned a dozen more questions. Every revelation added another layer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted, but desperately needed. The drive home felt shorter, though my thoughts were louder. When I finally pulled into the driveway, my parents were sitting at the dining table, waiting. My father's eyes were red. My mother's face was pale. I walked in slowly, the adoption file under my arm. No more running. No more half-truths. It was time. Tell me everything, I said. And for the first time in my life, they didn't look away. My parents didn't speak at first. They just stared at me, both fragile in their own ways. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, and my father looked like someone who had aged 10 years overnight. But they didn't run from the truth. Not this time. My father motioned for me to sit. I didn't. Something about standing gave me leverage. One small thing I could control in a life suddenly full of things I couldn't. He cleared his throat, a shaky, cracked sound. You need to understand that everything we did because we believed it was the only way to protect you. My jaw tightened. Protect me from what? My mother wiped her face with trembling fingers. From the life you were born into, she whispered. From the man your mother was trapped with. From a situation so dangerous that we weren't sure any of you would survive it. My breath hitched. Start from the beginning, I said. All of it. My father nodded slowly, as though preparing himself to unwrap a wound that never fully healed. We met Isabel through distant relatives, he began. She was young, alone, and scared. She lived with a man who controlled every part of her life. She tried to leave him once. She ran to a shelter. But he found her, dragged her home. After that, she stopped trying. She said she couldn't risk what he'd do to the baby. That baby was me, I whispered. My mother's face crumpled. Yes, my father continued. We visited her a few times, brought groceries, tried to offer support. But every time we saw her, she seemed more bruised, inside and out. A sick feeling spread through my chest. I'd known Isabel only as a name on a document. But hearing about her this way, scared, trapped, alone, felt like someone was pulling memories out of me that I'd never lived. Then, the night everything happened. My father paused, struggling for words. We got a call from a neighbor. They'd heard screaming, things breaking, someone yelling that he should have never let her keep the baby. We drove there as fast as we could. My mother shut her eyes as if trying to block the memory. The house was a mess. The front door open. Isabel was gone. And me. My voice came out small. You were alone, she whispered. In a corner, crying. She choked on the next words. We thought he hurt her. Or worse. No one knew where she went. I swallowed hard. This wasn't the version of the story I was expecting. It was uglier. More human. Less clear-cut. We called the police, my father said. But with Isabel missing, no witnesses, and an abusive man claiming she ran off. Nothing stuck. They opened a case. But his voice trailed off. It went nowhere. So you took me? I said, barely above a whisper. We took you that night, my father said. Yes, because leaving you there meant leaving you with him. And we couldn't do that. A thick silence followed. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt grateful. Part of me felt more lost than ever. So why lie? I finally asked. Why hide everything from me for 19 years? My mother broke before my father could answer. Because we were terrified you'd hate us, she cried. Terrified that if we told you the truth, you'd go looking for Isabel and find out we weren't enough. That we weren't your real family. Her voice cracked on the word real, and it cut deeper than I expected. My father leaned back, exhaustion written across his face. We wanted to tell you when you were old enough to understand. Then when you were older than that. And older. And then, he shook his head. Time kept passing. And the longer we waited, the harder it became. Every year the truth got heavier. Every year we feared losing you more. We let fear make a coward's choice. My mother reached for my hand. I let her take it, not out of forgiveness, but because I saw how badly she needed to hold on to something. We loved you, she whispered. That's the only thing we were ever sure of. The weight of everything pressed down on me. My anger didn't evaporate, but it shifted, blending with grief, confusion, and an ache I didn't know how to name. I lowered myself into a chair. What about Isabel? I asked. Did you ever try to find her? My father nodded slowly. We did. For years. We checked shelters, hospitals, old addresses. Every lead went cold. Sometimes I think she ran far away. Sometimes... He hesitated. Sometimes I worry she didn't survive that night. The room grew quiet again. It struck me that I wasn't just mourning a lie. I was mourning a ghost. A woman whose blood ran through my veins. A woman who fought to protect me until she couldn't anymore. My mother placed her hand over mine. If she's alive, she'd want to know you're safe. That you grew up loved. She'd want that. Her voice trembled with sincerity. For a long moment I didn't speak. My heart felt like glass, broken in too many places to count. But beneath all the fractures, something else stirred. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But understanding. Path forward. I want to keep searching, I finally said. For her. For answers. My parents didn't argue. They didn't beg me not to. They only nodded. Fear and hope tangled in their expressions. We'll help you, my father said quietly. If you'll let us. I didn't know yet whether I could. Whether trust could grow again in soil that had been poisoned for nearly 2 decades. But in that moment, I realized something important. The truth hadn't destroyed us. It had exposed us. All our flaws. All our fears. All our love. All our mistakes. Maybe that was the only way anything real could begin. I spent the rest of the night in my room. Not angry, not yelling, just thinking. About Isabel. About the man who hurt her. About the couple who raised me. About the boy I had been before this day. And the one I was now. The truth didn't give me closure. But it gave me something just as powerful, a direction. I didn't know whether Isabel was alive. I didn't know whether I'd ever find her. But I knew this. My story wasn't built on lies. It was built on fear, and love, and choices made in the darkest of nights. And now that I finally knew who I was, I could decide who I wanted to become.